I have 3 volunteers here.
I didn't volunteer.
I have 2 volunteers and a kind soul. And so I'm just going to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll go into some questions. At some point, I'll give you all an opportunity to ask questions if you wish. Yeah. So we'll start with Tracy. Ladies first.
Okay. So I'm Tracy Dean. I work for IBM, and I work in the development organization related to ZVM for ZVM tools, and I happen to also have IMS tools as well.
So I'm Perry Ruiter. I am a third-party CP developer, one of the last of the Mohicans. For the last 7 years, I have been supporting VPARs and VTape for VSSI, and that is used extensively in TPF test systems.
My name's Ray Garbowski. I work for Ruiter in New Jersey. I've been working on ZVM for about 3 years now. I first was introduced to it about 35, 40 years ago. Worked on it for a few years, and then because of cost, we kind of got rid of it. And about 3 years ago, Ruiter said they're going to bring ZVM in, and I kind of always liked working on VM, and I volunteered. Well, it was one thing I volunteered for, and I got it. So I'm continuing to work, because if it wasn't for that, I might have called it quits by now. So
Nice. All right. So why don't we again start, Tracy? Why don't you tell us a little bit about how did you start to come to VM? Or was it?
So I was in college up in New York, and I needed a summer job to get myself through the next year of college. And I'm from a very small town in New Hampshire, and I could go home and live for free and work someplace and not make a lot of money. I happen to have an aunt and uncle in Dallas, Texas, who said you'd come live here for free. And we have a friend who's got a job here for you at Travelers Insurance. I did that for a summer, and then met someone, decided I needed to come back the next summer, and applied to IBM. This is in the days when you could actually just go in, fill out an application, hand it in to somebody, and they called you, and you had an interview, and you got a job.
Like on paper, you just
Right.
wrote it.
Right. Yeah, this is a long time ago. So I started there my first day as a summer intern, and the first thing they said was, here's your system, here's your user ID, and you need to learn Rex. I said, okay, I don't know what Rex is, but I guess I can learn it. And I said, and who's, is there somebody that's going to help me or guide me? And they said, yeah, it's this guy over here, and his name is Rex. Okay, now I'm really confused. What's going on? But that was my introduction to ZVM. It was the coolest summer job ever. They were developing some new function in profs. Many of you know I started my career in profs development. And they were developing some new function, but they didn't have it ready yet to do user testing. We actually did usability testing, user testing, brought people in, recorded them using the product. And they needed somebody to use Rex to write some mock-ups of the screens and go through the scenarios and make sure that the panels, the flow was correct, it was usable, it was understandable. So I got to write the scenarios, I got to write the mock-ups for the screens, I got to go in and run the user test, watch the people on camera, and document the results. And that was my summer internship. So that was my introduction to ZVM, was writing some props panels on Rex.
Did you have to wear a lab coat while you were walking? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Ruiter.
My introduction to VM, like most things that a male does, a female was involved. In grade 12, I'm wondering what to do with my life, and one option was go to a certain university and get a criminology degree. But my girlfriend was going to a different university, and they didn't offer criminology. So I went there and became a math major, because that's what you did when you were interested in computer science. There was no computer science departments. And that university ran VM. And by the December of my first year, so I've been there for 4 months, I was hired as a student operator. So in December of 1978, the very first command I ever entered into VM was QT, hit enter, on the operator's console. And that was VM release 6, I believe. That's not VMSP. This is way before VMSP. 370, 158, I think, maybe 148. And then so, VM paid my way through school because I worked as a student operator, initially feeding cards in and then pulling printouts off of 1403s. 2 or 3 years in, I'm working weekends, running the machine. We have OSVS1 guest, burps out a massive dump of fan-fold paper. I call in the system programmer. He's flipping back and forth, sticking cards in here. And after about 2 hours, he circles. There's the problem. There's a bit wrong there. I was like, wow, I want to learn how to read dumps.
You really were strange.
Anyways, after I graduated, I was a systems programmer for the BC provincial government, British Columbia, Canada, provincial government for a dozen odd years. Then I went and worked for IBM for 15 years. Part of that in VM development. Things I've worked on that you will have used is I was 100% of the code for cross-system SCIF is mine in SSI. I was a third of the team that did the @ command for SSSI. Then I spent 2 years wandering in the open source wilderness. And then, as I said, for the last 7 years, I've been supporting a massive amount of CP mods, which is what VSSI's product is. So, yeah, at VSSI, we put the V into SSI.
That would be a good dictionary.
Yeah.
Okay, my introduction to VM goes back to early to mid 80s. Out of college, I was hired by a company called IEEE. I got on board as an applications programmer. I wrote code for a couple of years, and then I was getting kind of bored, so I put my resignation in, and the director came into my office and said, hey, we really kind of like you. What can we do to have you stay on board? And a couple of months earlier, they had hired our first systems programmer. I didn't even know what he was doing, but I got to know him pretty well, and I kind of saw what he was doing, didn't really understand it, but I knew it was something different from what I was doing, and I thought it might be kind of cool. So I told this guy, Jack, I said, if you can get me on board as a systems programmer and have this guy, Jeff, train me, I said, I'll tell you what, I'll stay. And he says, okay. He says, stay right here. He comes back 10 minutes later. He says, I talked to Jeff. He says, you're going to stay. So I said, good. So I go in, I'm talking with Jeff. I said, well, what do you do? He says, well, we're running OSVS1 under VM, and this is how things work and this and that. So I said, well, it looks kind of cool. And so he trained me, and about a year and a half later, he left, and I stayed on board, and I was the only VS1 VM systems programmer. And then throughout my career, I left there a few years later, but I always worked at small shops, and I was always the only systems programmer up until 5 years ago. So for 30-something years, I was the sole systems programmer in every shop that I worked at. So I did OSVS1, VM, I did VTAM, NCP gens, then into MVS, and then into ZOS. And I don't know, it's being the only systems programmer has its advantages but disadvantages, because, like I said, I've been doing this for 30-something years. Most of it was MVS and ZOS, because I only worked on VM for a couple of years early on. And then when I got hired by Wakefern, this was the shop that has 5 ZOS systems programmers and, CICS guy, DB2 guy. And I go in there with as many years as these guys have, but I can't hold a candle to these guys because they were siloed. All they did was ZOS. So I felt a little inadequate in a way, and that's why I was thinking, man, maybe I should call it quits. And then when I found out VM was coming in, I said, nobody else here knows VM. I'll kind of stick out again. And so I said, yeah, I'll stay on board. So, for the last 3 years, all I've been doing is ZVM. And it's, believe it or not, the early experience I had with VM really, really helped, because I didn't come in cold. I knew what was going on. I just didn't remember the commands off the top of my head, but I knew what I needed to do. And it was just a matter of hitting the books and, finding out what has changed. But believe it or not, most of the commands back in the 80s still exist today. There's just a few more options and stuff like that. So, and plus with the help of IBM, things are going really smooth.
Cool, great. How about first exposure to the VM workshop? Tracy?
Oh gosh. I never went to any of the VM workshops in the before the resurrection, if you will, right? I don't think I ever participated in those, right?
First dinner.
Refer to it as the new era.
Well, then I have to call it the old era.
Okay.
So I started coming to the workshops again when they were revived. And I honestly don't remember which was the first one I came back to. I don't remember, it's, when you start to go to all these conferences, unfortunately, they start to run together a little bit. So I don't remember, but I started coming back fairly soon after it was coming back online, right? Because I knew this was a place where VM was going to be a hot topic. And this is where I knew people gathered who couldn't afford to go to the bigger conferences, right? I mean, that was the whole point of the VM workshop, is to get people in here who don't have the budget to go to a share or a technical university or any of those bigger conferences.
So my first workshop was 1990 in Indianapolis, and I distinctly remember there was about 300 people from all over the world. There was not a single person from IBM. The entire track, and there was 3 separate session tracks, was 100% user-provided sessions. There was no vendors at all. There was an and-all presentation. It was a technical presentation on the comparison between VMSP, VMHPO, and VMXA spool. But I remember being very, very stunned that there was not an IBM presence. And now, sadly, we've become share light. Like user presentations, like things that users are doing. I mean, that's so interesting. This is a struggle we had, and this is what we did to overcome it, right? This is, I went to a vendor presentation and they said it was wonderful. I put it in, it was horrible. This is what I had to do to make it wonderful, right? That's the stuff that I love. That's the value of the workshop.
And what did they have for lunch?
The soup pairing was a little off.
But no, so back in the day, everyone used to stay in the res, because it was on campus, so everyone stayed in the res.
Residence hall.
Yeah, the residence hall. And all evening entertainment was also provided. And I remember one of the evenings they had rented the zoo, and they bused everyone to the zoo, and they had the catered dinner there was at the zoo. I think it was more expensive. I think it was around $300. But I remember the food was awesome, always.
And you've continued going to workshops.
Yeah, I went to the next 3 or 4, and then, I missed the last couple of the old ones.
Okay.
And then I missed the first few of the new ones. And then maybe my first new one was 2017.
That's what my records show.
Okay.
But this is easy for me. My first exposure to ZVM workshop was yesterday. So,
Excellent.
I'm not sure how I got roped into doing this. Because I was kind of naive, so.
Well, if you enjoyed this experience, it was my idea. If not, it was Tracy's. Great. Let's talk a little bit about your learning experience. So it sounds like you all had kind of different approaches to this. Ray, we'll start with you in terms of, a one-man shop, right? That had to be different than the environment where you got 12 coworkers and you can bounce stuff off of.
Right. Like I said, I mean, early on, this guy Jeff trained me. I worked with him for a little while, so I felt really comfortable working on VS1 and VM. And he was big on, don't ask anybody for help. Here's where you find it. And so our whole offices were just filled with manuals. He said 50% of being a systems programmer is knowing where to find the answer. So that he drilled that into my head, so I had no problems. And it kind of, from that point forward, if I really got stuck, I mean, I'd call IBM and open a ticket, but I would go decades without opening tickets. It wasn't until I got to Wakefern where these guys, any problems at all, just open a ticket. I probably got 3 VM tickets open right now. we as a company, there's always tickets open. It might be because we're a larger company too, so we experience different types of issues. But like I said, I pretty much work for small shops and really never had major issues. It just, everything went smooth. I mean, I don't know if that's a normal experience for everybody, but it was for me, so.
Good. So a lot of it was, just absorbing the manuals and
That's it. And like
way around that.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I think it has its advantages because I know a little bit about everything and how everything works together. But even with 30 years experience on MVS and ZOS, I mean, I don't think I could go to a real big shop and say, hey, I'm a senior systems programmer, like one of 2 or 3. But like I said, Wakefern's got 5, so they had no problem bringing me in. I mean, they knew I wasn't as strong as everybody else, but it's just one of those things that really worked out.
Barry, how about you? How did you pick things up?
Well, I was fortunate in that, the time I lived in, my university, the computer science was done on VM. What? Yes. Second level assembler class, I learned 370 assembler. Third level PL1, for a compiler class or whatever. Sort of towards the end there, Linux was starting to creep in. But yeah, and then being a student operator, I had an in with the systems programmers. I can remember, hey, I want to write this, so I go talk to the system programmer, what do I do? And he showed me how to steal PSWs, right? And then, the systems programmer, put a good word in. That's how I got the job at government. And there was always somebody senior above me to help me out. I started off installing program products, PVM, SQLDS, stuff like that. I probably shouldn't say this on camera. I have never installed VM in my life because I was never a lone systems programmer. I was always part of a team. And there was somebody else, first of all, when I started out, more senior, that was doing the installs. And then later on, I kind of focused into the debugging, dump reading, assembler type stuff. And so there was always somebody else doing the SES stuff because, in the early days, SES had a bad name. I was like, no, SES. I just want to sit here and read dumps. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess I was fortunate. I kind of had more senior people who can mentor me.
Cool. Tracy?
So when I worked for those 2 summers before I graduated from university, and then when I went after I got hired on full time, I was hired into the same organization, in the profs organization, and I was in system test. And I'll tell you, that was the best place to start, right? Because you had to learn everything, right away. Now keep in mind, when I say everything, I'm talking about profs, not ZVM. I wasn't installing ZVM, I wasn't maintaining ZVM, but I was installing profs, I was testing profs. Like as Perry was saying, right? The developers are over here just kind of doing their thing, but they had never installed the product. They didn't know what the customer experience looked like. And so I was very fortunate to have that exposure of being in test where I had to understand the whole thing and put it all together and make it work together and report when it didn't work together. So I sort of learned VM in the background, I guess, as I went, as I was learning profs. You had to learn a little bit about VM just to do anything in profs and log on and those kind of things, but most of it was initially in profs and then expanded into ZVM.
So, Ray, is there anything, you mentioned that from your initial to the more recent exposure to VM, a lot is all the same.
Yes.
Is there anything that jumped out as, ooh, that's different?
SSI cluster.
SSI clusters, okay.
Yes. Yeah, that's something we installed right off the bat. It's funny because when I was first looking at what we're going to be putting in, and as I'm going through, because I think I had to answer some type of questionnaire, do you want SSI cluster? I'm thinking, I don't even know what that is, so I put no. And then when I handed it in, I think the guy's name is Pedro, and
Yep.
he actually got back to me and said, Ray, he says, I think you should install SSI clusters. I said, I have no idea what it is. He says, don't worry about it, I'll teach you this and that. So we installed the SSI cluster. We only had one with running two LPARs. And then I think last year, or a little bit more than a year ago, we decided, well, we're going to install another SSI cluster with 2 LPARs, one being prod and one being test. And it's the best thing we ever did. And, it just makes the operating environment so much easier because, put maintenance on, obviously, you go to do it in a test cluster. And it's really wonderful.
So SSI, Perry, what's something about SSI that you wish more people knew about? Is there a hidden gem there, or something that is underappreciated, or? For the audience, I didn't prep him with this question.
Yeah. Maybe go to Tracy.
So,
I mean, I can think of lots of things in SSI that I would like improved, but
that was not the question, because I
that's
know
not,
that.
that's not the question. A hidden gem. Man,
Or perhaps
I'll tell you something
innovation.
something I really worked hard to make work was shared spool. I mean, we being IBM, had shipped shared spool for whatever, 30 years as part of CSE, across systems extensions. Who knew it didn't work? It basically worked with a two-way, but as soon as you hit it with a three or a four-way, I mean, it couldn't pass the field sobriety test. It just fell in. And that was hard. That was weird. I mean, it was all hard work. So yeah, I mean, maybe in hindsight, we maybe should not have done shared spool. We should have left spool out of SSI. But that was a lot of work to make it work, and yeah, probably people don't appreciate the effort it took. And
Well, that's interesting. So we'll go to the tester then too about this. So something that worked fine with two,
Yeah.
but not more than that.
Yep.
Um,
No, here's the rule of thumb. Works with one, works with two, works with more than two. Those are the three separate things you gotta get working. And the works with more than two is really hard.
Now, so I assume one of our testers, and by we I meant IBM, formerly from IBM. So, but anyway, one of them found that, or you stumbled on it one day, or
No,
a customer?
no. This is way before customers.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, no, Emily was, I think, the tester on shared spool.
So Tracy, from a testing perspective, did you have to negotiate with development about what you were actually going to test, or did you say, hey, we'll let you know what we're going to test? Or how does that work?
Oh, we tested what we wanted.
With
I
what
mean,
surprise
we had to obviously have a test plan, get it reviewed, make sure that people felt like it was coverage, but they were never allowed to say, you don't need to test this, right?
Okay.
You can add things to the test plan. You can't tell me to take things out of the test plan, right? I have to have the ability to test what I think needs to be tested. And you know what, if I report the problem and you say it's working as designed, okay, that's your prerogative, and we'll wait and see what the customers say, right? But
Right.
I still have the right to test it, so yeah. We still reviewed them, development got to see them, but again, development's in their own little world with their system tests and their component tests. They didn't really see the big picture of, get it installed with what everybody else over here is doing as well, right?
Right. We'll stay with Tracy for a second. So from your test experience, you talked about that's kind of like the customer experience. Is that part of what helped pull you into working with customers and that, or is that just happenstance of something else?
No, so it was two things. It was the test experience, but it was also, that meant I was part of the beta program, right? Because I was one of the people who knew what it was actually going to be like for a customer to install the product and see the whole thing. But also, I was very, very fortunate. I don't know why. I'll never know why. In my first 6 months of hire, I think I was hired I know I was hired in June after I finished college. I think I went to the share in August that year. I don't know why they said I could do that. I don't know, somebody took me under their wing and said, hey, let's go to share. I think you need to meet customers. And that, I was hooked. I was hooked immediately. I wanted to be working with customers. I wanted to see what the real world was like. And I still see that today, right? I mean, I have development teams behind me doing these products, and I have to bring that perspective to them, right? If they don't get out and see what a customer does, they just know, well, this is what I do in my development environment. It works just fine, right?
Yeah.
And, just do this, right? When you complain about something, well, just do this. I don't want to do that. I want you to fix the problem, right? So being able to bring the customer perspective, I just got lucky in those first few months that I got to go to a customer event and
Cool.
immediately wanted to go to more.
We'll research how you got that chance to share.
I won't say what time we left Second City in Chicago on that.
I have a follow-up question later. So Perry, you've been on like all the sides of the fence.
Yeah, sure, no, I've been a customer.
How
I've been
how has one influenced the other?
another question I wasn't prepping for. No, well, like Tracy said, like when I worked in VM development, like I understood what a system programmer's life was like because I had done that for a dozen years, right? And I hope that, you know, I could bring that perspective when I'm doing code, try to, I don't know, polish off some rough edges or something or whatever. And now as a vendor and a CP developer, yeah, I try to give good customer service because I know what it's like being on the other end of the phone when your system's down or something's not working. I've actually had one of my customers say to me, it's like, I love dealing with you because when I report problems, I get fixed. And I was like, I didn't know I had the option to. Thanks for letting me know.
See, good experience. Ray has, right, so way back you said you hardly ever opened any tickets and stuff.
Absolutely, I didn't know how.
Well, now you do.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. Do you find that you just get a fix from IBM, or do you learn in the process?
I mean, now?
Yeah, now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do a little research, but it just seems like I'm actually dealing with a problem right now that Tracy knows about. And I've had a ticket open with IBM I opened the first one probably 4 or 5 months ago. And obviously, since I opened a ticket, the problem didn't reoccur for a couple weeks. So they basically said, well, why don't we just close the ticket, and if it happens again, reopen it. And so a little time went by, had the same problem, opened the ticket. So now this ticket's been open for about 3 months. But they're having me issue all these commands and giving me fixes and all this stuff. And while I'm doing that, I'm learning a lot about how things operate. So I feel I learn more in a way by opening a ticket and working with IBM to work on a solution than if I try to just go through it myself, and maybe I'll stumble upon a fix or what went wrong, but really not understand why it happened in the first place. So I think opening tickets, definitely has a benefit, but I don't like to do it a lot of times if I don't put enough effort into it. I like to at least research it for a while before I open the ticket.
Awesome.
And we appreciate it.
All right, so let me just pause here to see if there's any questions from out there. Mr. Mullen.
So, your years of experience, what's the first thing that comes to your mind is something that was really challenging for you? And maybe you just talked about it, but, any of you, just something that was really challenging and how you dealt with it, how you resolved it.
Okay, so for our viewers at home, the question was, what's a big challenge that comes to mind and how did you resolve it?
A specific instance, or?
Yeah, I mean, whatever comes to your mind is, it's some success story. It's like, that made you feel really good. I figured out this thing, and just what you went through.
I could think of one that goes back a long, long time. We were still running VS1 at the time, and my boss came to me one day and he says, "Hey Ray," he says, "I think we're going to bring the 3705 in here." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Well, what are we going to do with the Memorex 1270?" So he says, "Well, we're just going to get rid of it." I said, "Okay." I said, the 3705, you got to, at the time I think we were running EP, or that's what we were looking to run was EP. And I knew a little bit about 3705s. But he thought it was basically a 3274 where you throw a diskette in there and then you set it up and then everything runs. I said, Al, this is quite involved. He says, well, there's the manual over there. I was like, really? So he says, and by the way, he says, the 3705 is coming in tomorrow. We have to have it up and running by next weekend. So I was like, oh boy. I said, are we going to get some help in here? He says, no. He says, do it. So I got the manuals out, and I had to get some help, but for the most part, I definitely met the deadline. So I mean, I was really, really scared because I knew enough to be scared, because I knew what was involved with the 3705 and EP. So it just, I don't know. That's the downside of being the sole systems programmer, because at that point in time, I wish there was somebody else there that I could bounce some things off of. Hope, maybe that person would have some experience with the 3705, but no, it was just up to me. So, but that went really well.
Cool. Anyone else?
Well, I mean, I love debugging, and I can remember that this was a problem back late, I don't know, VM ESA version 1 when it wasn't called version 1, because there hadn't been a version 2 yet. And we had a problem, and it would only occur like every 6 months. And so I made a mod to CMS, like, I'm going through the code. Okay, we're here, we went either here or here. And so you'd make a mod and take a dump at that decision point, and you'd wait 3, 4, 5, 6 months for the problem to reoccur, and then you get a dump. Okay, I know which way I went here. You follow the code. Oh, I need to take a dump here and make another mod to take a dump there. I chased that thing for probably 18 months before we figured out what was wrong.
So, help me. Were you with IBM at that time?
No, I was a customer.
Wait! You're
So this is-
modifying,
Yes, that's
looking
why,
at dumps and stuff?
you bet. That's why VM.
You love it or something?
Yeah, that's why VM won my heart, is I could look at the source and I could modify it.
That's why they no longer ship source code.
Oh, they still ship source code, but they want to stop, so fight that tooth and nail. No, back in the old days, this is as I say, before VM ESA version 2, you needed the assembler to install VM, to tailor and install VM. I had to do an HCP RIO and an HCP sys and so on. Of course, with version 2 on, we now have config files, the system config files. So, when you have the assembler and you can assemble the code, why not modify it?
I think there's a lot of people in this room could answer that question, why not?
Because what could go wrong? But if something goes wrong, you get to read a dump, so it's a win-win.
Yes, it's a win-win.
Tracy, do you have a challenge that comes to mind?
What did you use, SSCD by any chance? What part did you introduce to?
To read the dumps? There was a V.
There used to be a.
There used to be dump scan. I think before dump scan it was IPCS or.
Yeah.
Certainly the IPC. Because there used to be a company calling on.
Yeah, they had. Was it K-Pro or something?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
that was. I never was able to convince management that we should license that because reading dumps not our job. It's IBM's job.
Well, you can still do some stuff with track.
Yeah, no, I'll have a track. Tracy, sorry.
It's all good.
I don't really have one kind of big challenge. I have regular challenges because I go to a customer, and you heard my background, right? I started in applications that run on top of ZVM, right? So I'm not a ZVM expert. I don't install ZVM. I don't configure ZVM. It's things that I pick up along the way. But when I go to a customer to help them with my products, they see a ZVM person. And they bring up all this stuff that they've been wondering about ZVM and what they need help with and, those kind of things. So that's my kind of regular challenge that I get. And I will say manuals are good, right, when that happens. And lots of times I'll say, I don't know, I'll let you know when I come back tomorrow. I spend the night in the hotel room trying to figure it out. There's also certain people on my short list that I reach out to and say, I hope this person's online in the time zone that I'm in sometime between now and tomorrow morning that I can get some help with this. And there's a very short list of people that I reach out to where they know who they are.
Good question. Other questions? JP?
Do you guys have some advice for this new generation of people coming in CDM and general advice for us, newcomers?
Okay, yeah, so the question for the viewers at home is, do you have any advice for the newcomers? And I'm gonna add a bonus question to that. Do you have any advice to the 25-year-old versions of yourselves? Related to the industry. I didn't think that went through. So we'll start with the easy one, advice to the new generation today.
Jump in. Jump in. I think Ray talked about it, right? You are often the only person there. Make yourself indispensable, right? You'll keep a job, right? And you'll find jobs elsewhere. If your company, doesn't continue, you'll find jobs elsewhere because it's a pretty unique skill. And you're not going into a ZOS shop with 5 other ZOS system programmers, 2 DB2 system programmers, 2 CIC system programmers. You're going into a shop and you're the only one, right? And you might be a guy who inherits a ZOS guy who's supposed to help you or be your backup, but be indispensable. And it's pretty easy to do if you're willing to jump in and learn.
I think my advice to you would be, find out early on if it's something that you really want to do. Because if it's something you really want to do, you're going to be very diligent. It's not going to seem like work to you. And then I guess the worst case is, if it's something you don't like, maybe within the same shop, look around, see if there's something else that somebody's willing to train you on to find out if you like that. Because it's very important. I don't think any of us would have lasted this long in this career if it's something that we did not enjoy to do. Because I got to tell you, there was a stretch of 8 months when I was working for this one company and we were setting up a DR site. So I was working my 8-hour shift during the day to keep our one site online, and then after 5 o'clock going to the second site, setting everything up. I was putting in anywhere from 80 to 90 hours a week for quite some time. It got to the point where I physically got ill. I mean, I just had a call, so I just can't come in for a while because I physically got ill. And if I didn't enjoy it, I mean, I wasn't enjoying it then, obviously, but I enjoyed what I did. And so when the DR site got up and running, I mean, I went back to my regular 40 hours and everything was fine. But you just got to understand that this is a 24-hour-a-day job in a way, because you're always on call. You never, I mean, when I take time off, I take my laptop with me. I don't get called, but it's just in case. And so just find out early on if it's something you like. If not, find something that you like within the IT department. And I think you'll definitely succeed.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. Make yourself indispensable and like what you do. I mean, VM has let me live a charmed life. It's that simple.
We met all of you. Say that again? Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so I would add, and you heard both for the folks on listening to the recording, the IBM VM mailing list, the other mailing lists that are out there, events like this. The other thing I would throw in, am I allowed to throw stuff? Sure. Okay.
You're in charge. You
As
could
long as it's not a question.
Is look for areas where you can peel the onion back one level. Like sort of like what Ray was saying, when you're working through problems, when people tell you to do something or issue a command, it's okay to say, well, why? Why are we going that route there?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. Take advantage of the people that have that experience, or even if it's manuals, right? And learn why things and how things work, not just what to do, right? That will come back later on. I think one of the things that I've always enjoyed about this community is, unlike some other mailing lists and stuff I see, I'll see somebody say, well, it has to work this way to make sense, or I believe it works this way. I don't care what people believe or how they think it should work. I want people that have actually used it to say, this is what it does, or I wrote the code, or I got curious, or I wrote a mod to figure out how it was working, and I built the system. But yeah, those sorts of things I think are valuable.
I think the IBM VM mailing list is, I absolutely recommend that to any new customer I'm going to, right? Just lurk, right? You don't have to participate. You listen for a while, watch for a while, and then every once in a while, get out there and don't be afraid to put something out there. Everybody in the VM community wants everybody else in the VM community to succeed. We're not competing with each other in terms of, not wanting to help you because we don't want you to succeed. Everybody in the VM community wants everybody else to succeed, and we want to help you do that.
I'll add one thing I think a lot of young people don't understand. You have to create value for your employer. Right? You have to. You can't cost them more than the value you're creating, or you're not going to have a job. So create value. And yeah, make yourself indispensable is one way to create that.
Good stuff. Other questions? Yep.
Tell us a horror story.
And it can't be once upon a time Bill asked me to be on a panel.
I'm gonna have to think about this, so I'll go second or third.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind was, this is back with profs, and profs, you used to keep your email in, were reader files. And we were doing something trivial, like shutting down the system, and IBM was changing bus and tag cables or something like that, and then we're coming back up. It was supposed to be a completely simple change. Well, there was some bug, not a mod. You come back up and the spool's gone. And yeah, I mean, we lost people's emails. We're up all night trying to get them back. They're gone.
Never get them back.
No,
Wow.
Is that only, I thought process stuff in
no, that's Office Vision moved to the database. I think Prof said everything in.
No, it was on disk.
Okay,
Once it
so
was
it would
read.
just be unread.
It would be unread, yeah, exactly.
I had a question for you. Back when you were reading source code, when you had the source code for IBM patent project in Ireland, so any of the things you wanted to look at in PLO?
I'm an assembler guy.
Yeah, but if you were looking at their stuff,
No, VMs mostly until probably, I believe it was the console function that was added in CMS4 was the first thing that was not written in assembler, that was written in PLX. Because when I was a young kid, there was, gray beards, and one of them was Larry Chase of Cornell University, and I remember him saying, I'm keeping a copy of CMS4 without the console SPE. That's the last real version of VM. I can reassemble every part. Sorry.
No. Well, I'm going to embarrass Bill with this one because it's not technical at all, but it's a fun one. So, you make friends in this community, right? And very often, as a woman traveling, I have nice friends who make sure I'm taken care of and safe, and in safe places, not out walking by myself. So we were in DC at Share, and I was staying in a different hotel. And so I needed to take a taxi back to my hotel. And they said, all right, well, we'll walk you out and put you in the taxi and make sure you get in a taxi safely in downtown DC and get back to your hotel. They walked me out, put me in the taxi, turned around, somebody else opened the door and got in the taxi, and the taxi took off. And these guys, my friends, who were supposed to be watching out for me, are walking away, talking, no problem. And then to make it worse, the guy sitting next to me is one of my customers. So now he's got my attention for the taxi ride, very late at night, talking in my ear about something work-related.
My bad.
So, no, it was totally fun, but it was, yeah, that was my like, what do I do? I'm looking out the window for these guys to notice that this has happened, and they're just walking away.
Missed by that much.
Okay, sorry, I had to do it.
No, that's-
Actually, I do have a story, but I got to tell you, I didn't cause the problem. So,
Is it me?
no.
Okay,
This
go
is
ahead.
this is a long time ago. While I was still running VM, we had a VS1 production system, and I also was head on the side of a little VS1 sandbox. And I was scheduled to IPL the production VS1 system. Let's say it was Tuesday morning, so I get in early. And I had made a few changes, and I go to IPL, and things just not coming up. I'm getting these error messages, something about ParmLive. I'm sitting there saying, but I didn't change anything in ParmLive. What's going on? So I tried IPL again, and obviously the same problem. I'm thinking, what the hell's going on? So about a half hour later, this guy, Bob, walks in, applications programmer. He says, Ray, the system's not up. I said, yeah, I'm aware of that, thanks. So I said, it's saying something about ParmLive. I said, I didn't make any changes to ParmLive. And I look at him, and he's looking kind of funny. I said, Bob, did you make any changes to ParmLive? He's, well, I only changed this one thing. And I was like, well, what'd you change? So he told me. I was like, oh, geez. So what I did was, being we were under VM, I took the volume that ParmLive was on and attached it to my sandbox system, went in and saw what he changed it back, IPL. So we were out of the water. It was probably like an hour and a half total. But, I mean, when I went to IPL and it wasn't come up, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys here have experienced that. My heart just went like, oh my God, what the hell am I going to do? I don't have a clue. I mean, it's saying ParmLive. I didn't change anything in ParmLive, so that's about it.
All I did was.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're the only guy, so you're thinking, well, I didn't change it,
Right,
somebody did,
right. Yeah, because back then, you didn't, we, weren't running Rack F or Top Secret or anything, we couldn't afford it, so we just didn't lock anybody out of any libraries. And he thought he knew enough to make the change. And I think, now I'm thinking back on it, the issue was just a syntax problem that he had. What he wanted to put in was correct,
Forgot a comma or something.
something like that, yeah. So.
I thought it was
Probably 3 comments.
Yeah.
So I can tell the story maybe. So one of the ways to kind of deal with that is I can recall when I was working for IBM, dealing with a customer, and they had changed the SRM disk buff settings, which is usually something you shouldn't do. But once I found that, and I don't normally look for that because nobody changes that, but I once found it, I said, all right, here's the problem. Do we recall why that was changed? Oh, I don't think we changed it. I said, well, it's a privileged command. Is there anybody other than the people in this phone call that have that privilege? And it's silent for a little bit. They might have gone on mute. I don't know. They come back and say, well, we think it was an IBM contractor. So when in doubt, blame IBM. Any other questions from out there? All right. So here's one. We didn't really talk a lot this week about the theme is now and into the future. So I want you to put on your imagination hats. They're imaginary. And think about what you think would be cool to be in VM or Linux or VSE in the future. And Perry, you need to keep it to just like 1 or 2 items.
I'll keep it to 1.
Okay, excellent.
I would like to see Rex and CP, so you could write your system config file in Rex.
Oh. So you actually have like logic?
Yes, you can do logic.
That's something I've wished for.
What was it?
Oh, sorry, I would like to see Rex in CP. So you could write your system config file in Rex, and then you could do all kinds of logic, if then else. I mean, they've tried to, they've gone to like 2 passes through, and you can put condition tags on statements and stuff like that, but, full Rex, if then else, select, whatever. And I don't think it would be that hard.
Breakout key or something. All right. Interesting. Tracy or Ray, do you have anything?
I can't think of anything.
You love it just the way it is.
Yeah, I'm still learning it, so.
We could bring profs back, but that's just.
You want fast email?
Yeah, exactly.
I got one question for Ray maybe, like what you think might be useful for ZOS, what you would like to see in ZDM?
So,
From ZOS into ZDM. Give me some time. I think I can come up with something, but
Bookmark that one.
yeah,
ZOS.
I'll get back to you. But I will think about it.
You all ready for a couple lightning round ones?
No, can we say no?
You can, but I'm still gonna do it anyway.
Then don't ask a question.
So these are simple ones where I'm just gonna throw something out and short, either one word or one sentence answers. Exit prefix area on the left or the right?
Left.
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 Oh, okay. Write code, install code, or debug code?
All of the above.
Install.
Install.
Install, all right. ZVM or ZVM? ZVM.
Yes.
Your first concert?
Oh.
Scorpions, Girls' School, and Iron Maiden all together.
Wow. Motorhead.
I'm not going to answer because it'll embarrass the hell out of me. As you said, the reason why you do certain things is because there's a woman involved. I went to see Barry Manilow. My first concert. As a matter of fact, I married her, so.
Nice to bear.
Yes, yes. That was, yeah. I didn't tell any of my friends. Maybe you could edit this out.
Wow. Remember that special blooper reel? Favorite programming language?
Rex.
Rex and assembler.
Favorite language?
Assembler.
All right.
I'm gonna have to say COBOL, because I did that for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Those are it. So to wrap things up, is there any last thing you'd like to leave folks with in terms of that was impactful in your career or the community?
I will say my stepfather had 2 sayings that I heard repeatedly growing up. He never touched a computer in his life, but they still affect me today as I code. The first saying was, they keep improving things and improving things till they're no good anymore. And when I'm changing something, I'm constantly asking myself, am I improving this or am I making it no good anymore? Right? The second one is almost a corollary of the first. If you have to say it's good enough, you can do better. Right? And I'm always, when I'm coding, I'm asking myself, is this good enough or can I do better?
Tracy, right? Anything else?
I'll go back to my Girl Scout days, leave things better than you found them, right? That's what I try to do.
I'm not sure if this fits in there, but I remember I worked for this one guy, he was the president of the company. It was, at the time, it was the largest privately held third-party drug administrator in Jersey. And I got to be pretty good friends with him. And I remember I met him in the hall one morning. It was like 7:30 in the morning. There was just very few people in the building. He walks up and he says, "Ray," he says, "I don't know what you do for me, but I'm glad you're here." And I said, "Richard," I said, "the reason why you don't know what I do for you is because we don't have any problems." I said, "If we had problems, then you'd understand what I was doing for you." But I said, basically what I do is I make sure the computer runs, and so there are no outages. And he said, "Oh, that's good." But I got to tell, I mean, this was a guy who was really, really tough to work for. I remember, because I used to come in real early, and certain days I used to go home early. And he got a hold of my boss one day, and he says, "Hey, Scott," he says, "I see, it's about 3:30 and Ray's gone." And, Scott was telling me this next day. So I said, so Scott says, "Hey, Ray, maybe you should hang around." So I said, "Scott," I said, "but if I come in early, I want to put my 8, 9, 10 hours in. I want to go home sometimes." I said, "A lot of times I don't go home." So Richard caught me in the hall, and he says, "Ray," he says, "why do you go home early?" I said, "Well, because I come in early." I said, "If I come in early, I want to go home early." He says, "Ray," he says, "I don't mind you coming in early. You just can't go home early." that was the type of guy. But you know what? He really molded me. I mean, not that you can never be good enough, but you really, really had to apply yourself every day. You had to prove yourself every day. And, I think that is really a good thing because, it makes you who you are. And I mean, I always look back on a lot of things that this man has said to me throughout my career, and just, if I'm not sure what I'm going to do, I'm just, in my mind, I'm going to say, well, what would Richard do? And so, I mean, he's a tough guy to work for, but I'm really, really glad I worked for him for all those years. I worked for him for 20-something years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank each of you for contributing here. This has been great. I think we all learned bits and pieces here. I know if I ever get pulled over by the police again, I'm going to envision, what if Perry had gone down the criminology route? How I'll never listen to Barry Manilow again. And I'm always careful getting into a cab. So please join me in thanking our speakers here.